Welcome to the True Commercial Real Estate Podcast, your ultimate investor resource for all things truly commercial. Whether you're interested in industrial, retail, medical office, storage, single tenant, or any other type of non-residential real estate investment, this is your podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Non-Residential Commercial Real Estate Podcast with my co-host, Logan. And tonight, we are really happy to have with us Paul Moore, who specializes in commercial, has done syndication, has a lot of experience in real estate. And tonight, Paul will talk to us about self-storage. So, first question, Paul, very general question. Can you please introduce yourself for our audience and tell us about the major steps of your career so far?
Yeah, you bet. Well, it's great to be here. Like I said, it's an honor, and would love to connect with some of you guys later on. But yeah, when I got out of high school, I got an engineering degree, which was my first of many mistakes. And then I got an MBA, which I guess it wasn't a mistake, but I went to Ford Motor Company, really loved it there. But I felt like I was always trying to spend evenings and weekends like being an entrepreneur. And I tried some real estate stuff at first, and then I went into a bunch of other stuff and even had a stint. Yeah, I'm not going to even say it. It's so embarrassing. But at any rate, I've got a podcast called How to Lose Money. We've interviewed 238 people of their pain and about their pain and failure and losses on the way to success. So you can check out that to learn a lot more of the painful mistakes I've made in my career. A lot of them were in the area of chasing shiny objects. I finally got into, I sold my company in Detroit in 97, and in 2000 started flipping homes, then started flipping waterfront lots at one of Logan's competitors, and that is Smith Mountain Lake in Virginia. You guys have the other wonderful lake in this region, Lake Norman. And we did some ground up homes, modular homes. You know, it's not a good idea to be a builder if you don't know how to tighten your own doorknob. And I got taken advantage of by construction people. And I finally said, I really want to get into commercial. I just don't know where to start. Got thrust into commercial by building a multifamily complex in North Dakota in 2011. A buddy of mine owned and operated a couple of those for a number of years. And I wrote a book on multifamily called, very humble title, The Perfect Investment. And that's based on commercial multifamily, like large multifamily. And then I expanded into self-storage and mobile home parks a couple of years later. And now our company, Wellings Capital, manages a number of funds to invest in commercial real estate and give passive investors a piece through syndication.
Thank you. So I know from your story that you have some experience from going to from rugs to riches. Can you tell us about that? I find those stories particularly empowering.
Yeah, it was the year was 97. I put $1.8 million in my bank account from selling my company. I was only 33, high energy entrepreneur. Believed in Y2K. And so went to the Blue Ridge Mountains, and where we were just going for fun, not to escape Detroit or anything like that at all, and not to buy dehydrated food, nothing like that. But in all seriousness, what was the question? I completely started thinking about Y2K.
You got distracted. Your story from rugs to riches.
Oh yeah, that. So in 2007, exactly 10 years later, I had $2.5 million in debt, and all of that was against real estate. It was mostly lots at waterfront lots at Smith Mountain Lake, and it was some construction and some stuff I was working on. And of course, we didn't know that we were about to hurtle down the black hole of the Great Recession, the Great Financial Crisis. We thought, the worst is over. 2006 and 2007 were bumpy. Well, I had $2.5 million in debt. My business partner quit. He said, I can't make the interest payments on half this. You can have all the properties. You can have all the interest payments. We're still friends today, believe it or not. And so anyway, in December or so of 97, I had this crazy harebrained idea. I was like, I had two friends who met me at Hardee's restaurant and said, so you going to declare bankruptcy? I said, no, I think I'm going to give my way out of debt. And that's about how they responded. Crickets, like, what? I said, yeah, I'm just going to try this crazy experiment. My hero, George Mueller, would do things like this. And so I decided to start giving. Our family started giving to charities, giving to our church, giving to stuff that we were really passionate about. And to make a long story short, we were completely debt free 13 months later, right in the very worst months of the financial crisis.
Wow. What a story.
It's a wild story.
So, why is the author of a book about multifamily investing, which, like you said, is called The Perfect Investment?
Yeah.
Why is he not investing in multifamily now?
Well, that's a really good question. You would think that somebody who told their wife I was going to do multifamily for the rest of my career would still be doing it. But honestly, I love commercial multifamily, and I go into in the book in chapter 4 and 8 why it is the perfect investment. The problem is it's not perfect if you have to overpay to get it. And I came to the conclusion that multifamily was significantly overheated. I've got friends who are raising syndications, and they're actually raising too much money, as in an extra $1 million in the raise, just to pay investors their preferred return or any return the first several years, at least the first year and a half. And their logic is, well, the rates are going to go up, profits are going to go up, and we'll be able to pay the investors. Why? Like, well, what if they don't? What if something bad happens? So that scared me. And so I decided to look for something that had much more fragmented market. Did you know that 93% of multifamily over 50 units is actually owned by companies, not individuals, not small operators? And these companies actually have wrung all the value out typically. And it's very hard to get a really, really strong value add in multifamily. Self-storage and mobile home parks have, well, 85 to 90% of mobile home parks are owned by mom and pop operators who don't have the desire, the resources, or the knowledge to improve the value, improve the income, and raise the value. And it's unbelievably easy to raise the income and value on most of these. I've got stories, if we have time, that would blow your mind on how much we can raise the value of a mobile home park. Self-storage isn't much different. About 53% of self-storage are owned by mom and pop or small independent operators. And as a result, a lot of these can be acquired, a lot of value can be added, and a lot of profit can be made. And so that's why we like those asset classes. And that's why our funds focus on those two rather than multifamily at the moment.
So these are the main benefits of investing and the main reasons why you invest in self-storage. Are there further reasons to you picking that asset class?
Yeah, it's self-storage has a lot of great things. A friend of mine named Chris called me once and he said, hey, have you considered self-storage? The value adds are incredible. And I think I muted my phone so I could laugh, because I thought, well, wait a minute. I mean, we're talking about 4 pieces of sheet metal, some rivets, a floor, and a door. How can you do value add there? I mean, what are you going to do? Sweep it out between tenants? And I was completely wrong. Self-storage has a lot of value add opportunities. For example, adding U-Haul is a huge value add. And I'm going to give you an example of that in a minute. Adding a showroom with locks, boxes, tape, and scissors helps you get a lot more income, can be up to 5% more income. 5% income is a big deal when you look at the value formula for self-storage and all commercial real estate, which, as you all know, is value equals net operating income divided by cap rate. You can also add So you can add tenant insurance. You can charge late fees. You can actually make tenants pay on time. Wouldn't that be amazing? You can actually get a website and do marketing. I talked to somebody outside of Raleigh, and they were selling their self-storage facility. It was 100% occupied. Rents were below market. I said, "Do you have a website?" She said, "Why would I need a website? I'm 100% occupied." Well, that told me that she was really underperforming. She actually didn't. She didn't take credit cards either. Anyway, credit cards are a great way to make more profit at a self-storage, because when they put their payment on the credit card, they often forget about it. Some guy who was a doctor, actually, one day he was talking about self-storage investing, and he said, "Oh, I just realized I've had a self-storage. It's been hitting my credit card for 7 years and I forgot about it." He literally said that. And so self-storage has a lot of value adds. Let's do a quick math problem. What if I had a $3 million self-storage facility that was $2 million in debt and $1 million in equity? Okay, so remember, $1 million cash in. Now you add U-Haul. That means you sign an agreement with U-Haul, and you put U-Haul out front, and you get somebody to sweep them out and help operate the U-Haul business. And you can make sometimes $2,000 to $5,000 a month in commission. Well, let's say it's $3,000 a month in commission. $3,000 a month is $36,000 a year. My mom always told me I was good in math. And $36,000 a year divided by a 6% cap rate is an additional $600,000 in value. Wait a minute. I only got $1 million in cash, $1 million in equity in this. If I can sign a U-Haul contract and get that up and running, in theory, my asset value just went up from 3 million to 3.6 million, but my equity value just went up from 1 million to 1.6, a 60% increase in equity. I mean, that's 10 years of 6% a year profit, all from signing a contract and getting that started. I mean, I get that there's more to it, but the point is that value add is very powerful. What if I could raise the rates by 10%? If I can raise the rates by 10% and decrease the delinquency and increase occupancy from, say, 70% to 90%, and let's say I add some of these other things I mentioned, you could easily double, and I'm not kidding, triple the equity value in that self-storage facility in certain cases over the course of just a year or two. And I wouldn't be here saying that if I hadn't seen it done over and over for some of the assets in our fund. And so, sorry if I'm too excited, man. That's just some things I love about self-storage.
Thank you. And you mentioned fragmented market. Is it the case as well for self-storage, that the market is fragmented?
It really is. So about 10%, I believe, of the self-storage, maybe it's 14% now, last I checked, self-storage facilities are owned by REITs and large national operators, U-Haul being by far, excuse me, I'm wrong. Public Storage by far being the largest. They have 7% of the entire market in the US. Then there's U-Haul, Life Storage, some of the other Extra Space, some of the other large REITs. And then you've got a second tier, which is operators like Storage Rentals of America, SROA, et cetera. Lots and lots of great operators there. But after that top 24%, I believe, the other 76% are independent operators. Of the 76%, we believe about, I think it's 53 of the 76% are probably mom and pop or very small time operators. They may be operating well, but a lot of them aren't. I can tell you that, I mean, we went into Beeville, Texas, a town most of us haven't heard of. There was an asset there, a self-storage asset, had 607 units. The parents had died. Kids were all fighting. They didn't know how to run it. They were desperate to sell it. They sold it for $2.4 million, March of 2019. Cash offer. They wanted to close immediately and get out of that place. Had 80%, no, that's not right. Had 80% occupancy, extremely high delinquency. Rates were way below market and a ton of other problems, bloated costs. Within 3 months, that property that was acquired for 2.4 million cash was appraised in June of 2019 for not 2.4, but now 4.6 million. At that time, 2 million in debt was put on it. That's a 43% LTV. And the 2.6, excuse me, the $4.6 million appraisal came true a year later when the property was sold for that exact amount, 4.6 million. The investors got like a 400% return on their equity because of, leverage and all these value adds. That's the kind of power we're talking about here, Aurelian, when you're talking about buying an asset from a mom and pop operator.
Nice. Um, so you mentioned debt. Is it getting easier now that this asset class is getting more familiar for people? Is it easier to get debt?
That's a great question. Actually, some lenders we've talked to, one is we really like is Berkadia, which is a Berkshire Hathaway partnership. And we use them. They do Fannie and Freddie debt. And the terms on the debt for self-storage are almost identical to apartments. So if you know the multifamily, commercial multifamily terms, which is typically 2 to 4 years or more, interest only, mid 3% interest rate, 10-year term, 30-year amortization, non-recourse, fairly similar for self-storage. If you're a real small self-storage, you can get SBA financing, and we recommend Live Oak Bank out of Wilmington, North Carolina for SBA financing.
Fantastic. So now with the Myers and the we were talking before with Logan and about Osborne and his book about self-storage, is it overbuilt? Is it overcrowded as as an asset class?
Yeah, just like anybody can ask you guys, how's the real estate market? And you might say, well, it depends. If you're in San Francisco, Manhattan, or LA, it might be tanking right now. But if you're in Charlotte, Raleigh, Atlanta, a lot of places, it might be screaming right now. Well, it's the same with self-storage. I can take you to Nashville and show you why self-storage is overbuilt. In fact, I can, come meet you, Tristan, and you can take me around Charlotte and I can show you why self-storage is overbuilt in Charlotte. I can also take you to neighborhoods in southern Nashville, and I could probably find one in Charlotte where there's no self-storage and there's a huge demand for it. And so it's very hyper local. In fact, generally we look at about a 3-mile radius, and outside that 3-mile radius, it could be overbuilt. But if you don't have anything in that radius, it can be a great place to invest. Some people like AJ Osborne converted, a super Kmart in Reno. He had 2.5 million cash in it, 5 million in debt. And he turned down an offer for $25 million on that converted super Kmart in Reno. And that's the kind of deals, that we look for and that we want to see. And again, he took some risks there converting a super Kmart, but it obviously paid off for him. And he wrote a book on self-storage, and it's a great book that I recommend.
Nice. So we talked about the business plan. You buy from a mom and pop and you automate it. Can you come back to automation and what type of systems do you put in place?
Yeah, small self-storage. I know a guy in Alabama who has 12 self-storage facilities. He doesn't have any on-site managers. What he's done is he's contracted with a maintenance and repair person in each one of those towns. And then he's got a central command center. And that central command center, he's got one person who's got two-way communication with the people at the gate. They've got cameras everywhere. And they stay on top of it. They have hours there. They can actually talk to the people. The people can communicate with him or her on their iPhone, and they can rent the unit on their iPhone. They can go in, they can get the code to open their unit. And the downside, I will say, is it's a little harder to upsell them. And it's not possible to do U-Haul. And it's not possible to do retail items like locks, boxes, tape, and scissors. other than that, it seems to be a really good model, and the cost structure is quite attractive. The typical cost, multifamily is about, more or less 50-50. So 100,000 in gross revenue might turn down to, 50,000 in profit. Self-storage is a little better, quite a bit better. It averages for 34% cost structure. So 100,000 might turn into 66,000 net profit.
Thank you. Okay, so there was these were the questions I had for you, Paul, and yeah, I encourage people in the audience to please send their questions in the chat, and then we will cover them at the end during the Q&A. And now, Logan, I'll let you take over.
Absolutely, Paul. This is a wealth of knowledge so far, so I think everybody's learning already. So thank you. We talked a little bit about the operational side of it. I'd like to dig into the actual financing side of it a little bit. I think everybody here is at least familiar. We talked the last meeting. Jacob was doing some syndication. I'd like to hear a little bit about your experience with syndication and how you grew from, your earlier investments into the syndication model.
Yeah, I have a little funny story. This is a true story. I had a mentor, and if you guys ask me, I have an opinion. I wrote a book on self-storage, and the last third of the book is dedicated to 7 paths to get into self-storage. But the truth is, it's 7 paths to get into all commercial real estate. Well, I was on a path number 6 on my list, which is finding a paid coach or mentor. And I had a paid coach. And after a year and a half, 2.5 years with him as a coach, I had a lifetime contract. And he got on the phone with me and 2 other people on my team. And he was quite blunt. And I was actually believing that I had these large investors in China. I had this one guy who had a list of large potential investors in China. And after 2 deals in a row had gone south because I couldn't get hold of those investors, I was just resisting syndication. I was resisting building an investor base. He said, Paul, don't call me again until you've done what I said. And it was so embarrassing. And my team had to hear that. And I dedicated myself on that day in September 2016, not that long ago, to go out and build a list of investors and start syndicating. So I did that. And in December of 2017, I closed on my first syndicated deal, which was multifamily with 51 investors. Average investment size, if I remember right, was 80,000 each, 50,000 minimum, all accredited. And that was a Reg B offering. We only use Reg C now, but we can get into the details on that if you want. And the way I did that real quick, how much time do we have, Logan, and how many questions?
We've got 5 or 6 more questions too, but we've got time.
Yeah. So the bottom line is the way I did that, and I could go back to the philosophy for why, but I can just tell you that I wrote a book, and then I actually started appearing on podcasts. Then I got my own podcast. Then I started doing ebooks, webinar, nice website, and I did a lot of blogging on Bigger Pockets. That combination of 5 things is what allowed me to build a very large large for me, investor database. I mean, I had 2 investors before, so anything was an improvement, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's phenomenal. That's awesome. I think a lot of people who are interested in that syndication model and how to grow and how to expand from there. In the early stages, you mentioned your transition up. Were you just finding friends and family to invest? Were you investing your own money in the beginning, or how'd you start out?
In the very early stages, it was friends and family. I mean, we were buying lots at Smith Mountain Lake in Virginia. I'm talking about 2004 to 8. And then when we got to single families, single families from 2000 to 2008, I was doing my own money and borrowing what I could from BB&T Bank. And then when we got to the multifamily 2011 to 15, we were using friends, family, bank, and a handful Well, there was actually all friends and family, now that I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that syndication in December 2017 was the first time I was going out to investors I hadn't previously known until that period of time.
Yeah. Wow. Phenomenal. Awesome. I know that part of your investment strategy now includes funds, which is slightly different than a syndication. Can you talk to us a little bit about the differences between those two and, maybe your preference for one or the other?
Yeah, a fund, I was surprised to find out, is just a big syndication.
Mm-hmm.
And so a syndication, most of you know what that is. Basically, it's an operator, syndicator, sponsor, whatever you want to call them, who does all the heavy lifting. They get the debt in their name and they go out and find passive investors called limited partners. That's a syndication. A fund does that same thing, but it mixes the diversified group of assets. It might be 2 properties, it could be 200 properties. They're all under this one umbrella. And the returns are, at the end of the day, equal the combined returns or losses of all those properties put together.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. So now in your investment strategy going forward, are you primarily investing through funds, or are you primarily investing through your standard syndication that you would?
Logan, we're completely open to doing a syndication. In fact, I heard about an opportunity today that was appealing,
Mm-hmm.
but we are, now that we're into funds, we really like the diversification across asset classes, geographies, operators, strategies, and of course the assets themselves. So with those 5 opportunities for diversification, we're always going to do funds as far as I'm concerned.
Excellent. Awesome. We've got a few more questions here, and not all of them, or they might be a little bit out of order. We've gone a little bit out of order today, back and forth. So I want to ask a few questions, and then we might get into some of the audience questions as well.
Great.
And one of them is about your podcast. Why is you spoke a little bit about it, and it's called How to Lose Money. Talk a little bit more about that podcast. I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
My daughter and I used to go on this father-daughter retreat in Callaway Gardens, Georgia, year in and year out. And every year, the guys would get up on stage, these men, and they would talk about what great fathers they were. And between, they do breakout sessions and lunch, and all the guys there would just, well, not all, but many of the guys I noticed just felt ashamed. Like, man, I'm a bad father. I guess I just never make it. I didn't have that good training. I don't have that money. I don't have whatever. And I noticed that at other conferences as well. People just feel like, man, I'll just never get to that guy or gal's level. Mm-hmm. Well, what I suspected was these people had the same pain, failures, losses, and insecurities along the way that everybody else. They just weren't talking about it. And so I actually ended up on the stage, and I found out that was absolutely true, that I and others had the same pain, insecurity, pain and losses. And so I said, why don't we talk to these people and get them to come clean and talk about their pain and failures and how much money they lost. And so we did that, and we found it was a wonderful experience for these people to tell the truth about their pain. And it's been a great experience of hope for these investors and other listeners who realize, wow, if that guy, Gino Wickman or Mike Michalowicz or whoever made that many mistakes and they're now at the top of the heap, maybe I'll get there someday too. So that's our desire, is to build hope.
Yeah, there is the beauty also in entrepreneurship. Some of the greatest lessons you learn is from your failures, from your mistakes.
Yeah, it's very true.
That's awesome. I think we're going to open it up now to the audience, if you don't mind, and ask a few more questions. One of the questions that we have here is what is the typical process to set up a fund? How does that work?
I'm going to answer that, but I've just got to tell somebody, and I hope I don't cry. And I'm actually serious now. No. We closed out a syndication exactly a year ago this week. And we paid all the investors every dime we could. Our mentor, who I still have the contract with, said, you should set aside some money for expenses that might come up later. Set aside $20,000, and after, say, 120 days, you can pay it off. Well, we did all that. Got a bill last night, $43,000. And I'm the only guy left to pay it. So y'all learn that lesson. $43,000 bill from the local taxing authority, and our CPA showed us why we absolutely have to pay it, why we really owe it. We said that makes no sense at all to us, and nobody gave us any clue that we'd ever have to reserve that money. So there's another how to lose money story, my friends, because I'm going to be on the hook for this unless any of you guys want to give toward that. My GoFundMe account, no, I'm just kidding. So what's the process to set up a fund during compared to a syndication? Is that right?
Yeah.
Exactly the same.
Okay.
Yeah. So the process is you go out and get a syndication attorney. They'll charge you anywhere from $8,000 to $25,000. They'll put together they'll do a long interview with you first. Then they'll put together an operating agreement, and then they'll put together a PPM, which is a private placement memorandum. You'll go back and forth, checking all the errors, checking off everything. Then they'll eventually put together a simple, hopefully simple, subscription agreement. And then if you really want to do it professionally, you will get a portal. You can do like a white label solution, like CrowdStreet has a portal. There's all kinds of other portals. And you can have your investors interact with you and sign all the DocuSign and everything through that portal. And if you're doing a regulation, see, these are all Regulation D, 506, whatever. So a 506B means you can have up to 35 non-accredited investors, and everybody else has to be accredited. And with a 506B, you have to have a prior existing relationship with these investors. You have to have already known them for a while. Nobody says what a while is. Some people say it's a week. Some people say it's a month. But you have to have that relationship before you tell them about the deal. The other type of fund is a Reg D 506C. With a 506C, you don't need a pre-existing relationship, but they all have to be accredited, and they all have to prove they're accredited by a third party.
Excellent. Awesome.
Thank you.
Waylon, you want to jump into the next crowd question?
So a comment question. So self-storage seems to be part investment, part business with employees. Is that an accurate observation?
Yeah, it's funny. It's part real estate and it's part retail. And the problem is self-storage. The problem, by the way, for the seller is your opportunity as a buyer. The problem for the seller is they got into it because they thought it looked really, really easy. How hard can it be? It's just a bunch of boxes and people store their stuff. There's no toilets, tenants, and trash. And that's absolutely true. The thing is this, it's easy to run a mediocre self-storage facility. It's hard to run a great one. And a great one is part retail and part real estate.
That's phenomenal. Yeah. So one of the other questions kind of to dovetail on that is, how do you manage a self-storage facility, since it is kind of retail and it is a little bit more intensive than, a passive investment. It's part business. How do you manage that from afar if you're not local to it?
Yeah. So if you're the asset manager, then you're going to want to try to find let's say it's over 350 units, which is typically 35,000 square feet. That's 100 square feet per unit on average. That's a 10 by 10. If you have over 350 units or 35,000 square feet, that's by no means a hard and fast number. That's just what I keep hearing in the industry. You can afford a full-time person. You can put the full-time person on site by building them an apartment, or you can have them live nearby, and you want them there to manage it. They manage it and they do all the heavy lifting. They do all the, U-Haul check in and check out. Hopefully they do the storage check in and check out. They do the upsells. They manage the showroom. If you want to have an automated one, we already talked about how to use the iPhone model and the kiosk and all that.
Sure.
But either way, if you're doing it remotely, you're going to want to drop in often. You're going to want to keep cameras there. Of course, they're going to know they're on camera. You're going to want to have very, very careful controls to manage this facility and make sure that they're doing everything right on the other end. And you're really going to need to trust that property manager.
Makes sense.
So we've talked about the mistakes, and so in terms of managing and overseeing the management of self-storage units, have you ever encountered any duds, any hiccups?
The worst thing that can happen with self-storage is for a competitor to build down the street. So we were in Bradenton, Florida. We invested in a self-storage facility. Everything looked great. And two competitors, I'm talking about large national, beautiful competitors, built right down the street. And those competitors meant that this property has never leased up anywhere near as fast as it should. And because of that, it has never got to profitability yet in about 3 years. And so that's the biggest mistake we've seen. That is not being at the right location for whatever reason. In that case, it was because we didn't know a competitor was coming in, and we should have known. The planning and zoning, the building permits were already pulled. We should have known. Another problem, the biggest type of theft in self-storage, it might sound funny. I guess it's not to the people it happens to. Somebody actually rents a unit, and then they go in the unit, they store stuff for a while, and then they go in the unit, and somehow they get in after hours, or they stay there after hours if they can, and they actually cut through the walls, and they can go in each direction, cutting through walls, stealing people's stuff. Wow. And that's usually not discovered for some time. And so that's definitely something with an outdoor self-storage that's much more possible than an indoor. Indoor, that would be really hard to pull off with cameras and microphones and everything. You could hear it.
Wow. Yeah, you wouldn't think about that, but I suppose people that want to steal stuff are going to find a way.
Yeah, so, that's right.
Yeah, but one question that came up in the post here, which is a great question. How is your team finding these? What's the best way to find them? Are you finding them through brokers primarily? Are you reaching out to mom and pops with letters or calling? How are you finding the deals the best way?
I'm smiling because several of our operators have just these brilliant ways of finding them. We all dream about, setting up, well, I don't know if we all do, but many of us dream about setting up a system where we're systematically calling, leaving voicemails, sending handwritten notes, sending handwritten letters, sending cards, these contact management type systems. I've never seen anybody pull it off systematically over a long period of time except one of our operators. One of our operators, he actually built a room in his office there, and he has 4 people on the phones 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And with the management guy, he does calls too. So that's 5 people making calls, and they can make 100 to 150 on a really, I guess you could say, good day, maybe not a great day. They can actually make up to 200 calls each. So that means with 5 people, they're making up to about 750 calls a day. And if you look at the whole universe in the United States of all the self-storage facilities, there's only, let's say, there's 53,000 self-storage facilities in the US. That's the same as all Starbucks, McDonald's, and Subways combined. So if 20,000 of them are on your target list and you can call 750 a week, that means you can call through the whole list. I'm scrambling to do the math in my head in about 25 weeks. That means that group of 5 can call through the entire list of all the target self-storage facilities in the country, let's say 20,000, about twice a year. Well, he just doubled the size of his team. That's how good this is working. They've got 10 people calling all the time now. They're calling all the self-storage and mobile home park owners. By far the most effective way I've ever seen. Here's a quick story. 88-year-old guy got a call. He was in Michigan, and they called him and said, "Do you want to sell your facility?" He said, "Nope, not at all. I'm only 88." And they called him every quarter because it was a prime facility. Every quarter they called him 4 times a year till he was 89, 90, 91, 2, 3, 4, 5. And finally they got a call. I know how it's going to sound here, but it's not that way. They got a call from the guy's niece and said the family had a meeting and we just talked the old man into finally selling. You know that offer you gave him 2 or 3 years ago? Is that still good? And the guy, my friend, said, no, yeah, the offer's still good, but isn't that kind of low for? And she goes, forget about it. What's he going to do with all that money anyway? So she said he'll take it. And so they bought the facility and it has made a huge profit since then.
That's incredible. No substitute for hard work and just getting on the phone and calling people.
No kidding.
One last question. So for people to understand, you consider yourself a due diligence partner. Is that correct, Paul?
Yeah, that's right, Aurelian.
So for people to understand, I have a question here for someone asking what's the minimum number of units you look for in a facility when you purchase?
Yeah, there's a regular, so there's the main facility and then there's what's called a bolt-on, and you can imagine what that means. So in our fund, we would generally look for assets about 350 units and above, like I mentioned. Often, 500 units and above is getting more toward what we want to see in our fund. But a bolt-on facility could be something that's just a mile away and might have 100 units and can be managed by the same office manager, same repair people, etc. It's just a nice little add-on. And so that could actually be any size. In fact, that could even be an empty lot that we could pave or gravel and add boat and RV storage and run by the same manager.
Phenomenal.
One more question, Logan?
No, I said that opens up a whole nother can of worms that we probably don't have time for. But storage, as opposed to just thinking of the little cubes with the garage door on the front, is such a broad category in and of itself. You just hit on that. RV storage. There's lay down storage. There's cold storage. I mean, there's lots of different opportunities in that sector.
Yeah, Logan. Hey, Logan, would it be possible for me to answer Darren's question that just came in? Because I feel like I failed to hit something really important.
Please do.
Darren asked about population density and some things like that. Here are 4 things you need to know to decide where you want to invest. And this is for ground up, or a Kmart or Sears or Toys R Us conversion or something else conversion, or acquiring an existing facility. You're going to want to find a location with Radius Plus. Radius Plus is an online app. You can put in the address of the facility, the number of units, and you can it will draw a radius, whatever size you want. If you're downtown, maybe you want to do a 1 mile radius. If you're in a regular suburban location, maybe a 3 mile radius. If you're in a rural location, usually don't invest in those. But if you are, we've got one with 1,000 units in Ishpeming, Michigan, with 4,000 people, and it works like a charm. It's full. So you could do a rural location, but you might want to do a 10 mile radius then. Okay. So Radius Plus draws a radius around your location, and it measures the number of self-storage units and square feet, and it measures the number of people. And the goal is to get a ratio of about 7 square feet per person or less. Now, if you are in a place like Michigan or Wisconsin or Illinois, Minnesota, Ohio, Indiana, where they have moderate temperatures and a lot of basements and a lot of attics, then you would be fine. Richard, for example, in New York, you might actually have a higher, I shouldn't say you'd be fine, you'd have a higher number of average square feet per person. I said it wrong. Darn it. I knew I was going to say it wrong. Okay, so you would actually have a lower usage of square feet per person. 7 or 8 is the national average. So below 7 or 8, you would think would be great. And in a place like Florida, it would be great. And so if you're in a place like Florida, where there's no basements, Ken, and there's no attic storage because it's too hot, you might be able to go 10 or 12 square feet per person and be okay. But if you're in a place like I mentioned earlier, it might only be 4 or 5 square feet per person. Okay, that's the one big driver. If you don't pass that test, I would say don't do the deal, unless it's boat or RV storage. That's different. Second, you want to be on a main road with a high traffic count. Third, you want to be very visible on that road. You don't want to be down behind a Walmart or behind a hill like one property I know that you can't see. And then fourth, you want to be in an average to high income area. It doesn't have to be super high. I mean, it doesn't have to be Myers Park, Logan, but you want a place, that generally has a higher than average income. And a place like Weddington or something like that. That's a place in Charlotte, isn't it? Oh, well. Oh, Logan, I can't hear you. Tristan, is that a place? Bail me out. Anyway, but seriously, you want a place that has an average or higher than average income. You definitely don't want a slum or a war zone. That's a long answer, Darren, but I hope that helped.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, so I think we've reached the end of the interview. Thank you so much, Paul. And yes, Weddington is right outside of Charlotte.
Thanks, Tristan. You
says.
bailed me out.
Tristan bailed me out. Aurelian had me locked out. He didn't want me to talk anymore. He said that's enough.
Sorry.
That's because he's jealous because you live in Myers Park, I bet.
No.
So yeah, thank you so much, Paul. That was very insightful.
That was phenomenal.
Yeah, you bet.
That was absolutely phenomenal. Just a wealth of knowledge. It's I could sit here for another 2 hours and talk about this. So phenomenal. Your passion comes through in it. You can tell you really love what you do. So
I really
thank you for bringing that to us.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. And I know some people.
Yeah, why don't you share this story about giving your way out of a difficult situation?
Yeah, Edward, it's pretty much what I said. I mean, honestly, I really believed. Some people call it karma. Some people call it the law of sowing and reaping, planting and harvesting. I really believe that there's a universal principle that if we give, we'll get back more. I do not believe it's absolutely automatic because I've seen it not happen, but I generally believe it's true. And I believed that because our backs were against the wall, we were desperate, we prayed. And I really believe that as a result, we were able to go from this $2.5 million in debt to debt free. And because I believed it and because we took those actions, what happened specifically is 4 weeks into that giving, we were giving a set amount per week, which was quite painful. 4 weeks into that, I had a chance meeting with a real estate developer, and I told him about this 5-acre lot I had at Smith Mountain Lake, which is sort of like Lake Norman, Tristan. And the 5.3 acre lot I could not subdivide. And if I could sell it for like, 300,000 per lot. But with 5 acres, I couldn't sell it for, much more than $500,000. It's just how it was. Because, if it was one building site, people aren't going to pay, 1.5 million for that. Well, I actually got this idea from him from this chance meeting. And 2 days later, I was sitting in front of the planning and zoning administrator for Bedford County, Virginia. And I said, hey, I've got this idea. And I think your law says this, and I could go into deeper dive on that, but it's sort of technical. Your law says this, but it doesn't answer this question. What if I did that? Could I get around your law that would not allow me to subdivide it? Please? And the lady looked up from her paperwork and the survey I had hand drawn, and she shook her head like, I've been working in this job for 38 years. Nobody has ever come to me with such an outrageous proposal. And then she laughed. She said, but you did. She said, you found a loophole in our law. And that law has probably been written for 100 years, and you found a loophole nobody ever else has. Yes, you can subdivide into 5 lots. And that was one of the many big steps in 13 months that got us to debt free.
Phenomenal.
Fantastic.
That's phenomenal.
So there is I don't know if it's a comment by Darren. It says fill in the blank, multifamily, self-storage, and then mobile home park, and then.
Oh, yeah. What's next? I'm open to medical office buildings. If I could find anybody out there who knows anything about that.
Well, you're in the right place. Jacob
I'd
is
like to
among us
talk to
tonight.
Jacob about that. And I'm also interested in senior living, not nursing homes, but senior living. So those are 2 I'm interested in. I've been interested in cell towers for 21 years, since 2000, but I've never found a way to systematically find land and put cell towers on them. I actually know how to do it. I've just never figured out a way to do it. I actually spent a long time. I even bought some land that had a cell tower contract on it that fell through.
Okay, so I think what we can do now is end the recording and then end the interview with this question, Paul. Paul, how can people get in touch with you?
They can just reach out to me at my website, which is wellingscapital.com. That's WELLINGSCAPITAL, wellingscapital.com. And we actually have a special report that we're offering at no charge to anybody. It's wellingscapital.com/resources if you would like to get a copy of that special report.
Let me know if I typed that correctly. I put that in the chat for everybody.
You got it. Thanks, Logan.
There we go. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Logan. Thank you, Paul. That was very, it was loaded with information, and I think we covered a lot of what people need to know before investing in self-storage. And so thank you for that.
Thank you. It's really an honor to be here. You guys are awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's phenomenal. Well, hang around if you want to. We're gonna do some networking, and we'll all jump out into the room and let everybody kind of open up and ask questions. And just, normally our networking is just kind of sharing what you have going on, any other deals we're working on, so on and so forth. So if you got time, hang around. Don't feel like you have to, but yeah, we'd love to have you. Awesome, man.
So what are everybody's thoughts about self-storage? Is it an asset class anybody here in the group has thought of investing in?
I have thought about it. It's the retail part that is made it a little bit hard for me to value and to figure out how to hire people. And there's a lot of self-storage by the big names that Paul mentioned around here. And some of the more mom and pop places, I don't know how to approach them. I don't know if it would be a good deal. And it seems like self-storage has the same problem that multifamily does down here. It's just so expensive.
Yeah, that's my problem as well. There's one I researched. It probably is less than 50 units. It's owned by a small mom and pop couple. They're in their 80s, and I've really thought about calling them. Mainly the reason I was one is after my last rehab, I've got my whole third garage so crammed full of materials, and I thought, man, if I could just find one that basically broke even and I could use 2 of the units, it would be perfect. But there's an old grocery store that they converted into climate controlled. They just built 2 other big box self-storage places. So, I mean, you can throw a rock and hit 3 or 4 of them. So that's what's got me concerned in my area.
Do you have a need in your area for outdoor storage, like Paul was talking about, for RV or for any boat storage, where maybe you could put up a few of the buildings for yourself, but store primarily assets that they're not taking care of?
So that's all over as well. Just about every self-storage has gravel parking because we're by the Tennessee River. So there's tons of boats and RVs. So it's really tapped out. And the one little spot I was looking at is kind of landlocked, and there's not enough room to put anything else besides and it's all outdoor, nothing's fenced in. And I mean, the security of that one kind of scares me as well.
Yeah, for me, I have like control issues, so I don't want to venture out of my MSA right now. And I see one of the questions I had for Paul was the density, and so I already see Kmart's being, just kind of like, gosh, I forgot his name. He was on the podcast, and he was like the guy that was like paralyzed, and he was like, yeah, I converted a Kmart into a huge like drive-through self-storage. And like that's happening here in Tulsa. And so I feel like I'm a little late to the game if I am to potentially jump in, at least in this MSA that I'm in Tulsa. So yeah, that's kind of been my barrier of entry.
Yeah. It was neat that what Paul said, Radius Plus, I believe, was the system you use. And it was neat to hear that typically you're looking at 3 mile radius. So like you said, even in an area like Nashville, that's, overbuilt, or even Charlotte that's overbuilt. Is it accurate to say there are still opportunities out there? It's just, you're going to have to find the right neighborhood. Is that accurate, Paul?
Yeah. I will say this, that I've heard, though I've never seen it in print, that RV sales have gone up 600 or 700% since COVID. Man, I've seen 2 RVs pop up in driveways near my house, and I got to believe that there's an opportunity there. I told a friend of mine that a week ago, and he started calling around, and every boat and RV storage place in the area that he called was totally full.
Wow. Yeah,
I can chip in here. There's a well-known speaker, Harry Dent, who's also an author. He's a demographics expert, among other things, and he thinks RV sales are likely to just have a tremendous tailwind with the aging of the American population.
It makes sense to me. I mean, my son and I are both talking about buying 4-wheelers. I don't think we want to do RVs, but I mean, I never thought about getting a 4-wheeler before. I mean, I bought a motorcycle the other day.
Nice. But there's an opportunity there. I was speaking with a gentleman just this past week who is looking to do storage for cars, but he doesn't want just a 10 by 20 just to store a car. He wants to kind of upscale it a little bit. He would have epoxy floors, and they would have nice lighting, and then they might have an area for, they may put a couch and a TV in one side of it, but it might be just a little bit larger, but it's a nice area for them to go store their cars. He and his buddy both have one beside each other, and they'll BS and have a cocktail, and just talk about their cars. And it's, so it's interesting to see all the different niches that can come out of this asset class. That's not just store your stuff when you're moving.
Yeah, and we didn't talk to the recession-proof aspect of self-storage, but can you say a few words about that, Paul?
Yeah, and I don't want to overplay this point because it could be exaggerated, but here's the general principle. If I'm renting an apartment for $1,000 a month and they raise my rent 6%, that's $60 a month. That's $720 a year I'm locking in for if I sign that lease. I might leave. But if I'm renting a self-storage facility for $100 a month and it's a month-to-month lease and they raise my rent 6%, $6 a month. I'm not going to go down and move all my stuff, spend a weekend taking all my my treasures out to move down the street to save $6 a month, especially when they could raise my rent next month $6 or more. Yeah. And so it's generally sticky for tenants. What that means is in a recession, people generally don't leave. And furthermore, those same people might be, or different people might be downsizing from their large to their small home, or their small home to an apartment, or they might be going through any of the 4Ds, the other 4Ds, that is, and that's death, downsizing, dislocation, and divorce. And those 4Ds cause a lot of trouble in the world, and they also cause a lot of people to need self-storage. Now, in good times, people are filling up their Walmart or their Amazon cart, and they need a place to store their stuff. And so in good times and bad, self-storage has a pretty interesting business proposition.
That's awesome.
Thank you. I was quite surprised by the size of one of the deals you mentioned in Texas, in this small town.
No kidding.
How do you explain that such a big facility could be located in the middle of what seems to be
Yeah, Beeville, Texas, 608 units. Yeah, the demographics work there. One of the things we love about investing in small towns, especially in assets that are almost full, like Ishpeming, Michigan, 1,000 units? What? Beeville, Texas has 12,000 people. Ishpeming has 4,000 people. There's no competitors going to come in. And the biggest risk to self-storage is a competitor coming in and undercutting your prices. There's not going to be a public storage built in Ishpeming, Michigan.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing we love about it. And if the radius statistics works, it can work. That's one thing I love is you can work in it. You can do a 10,000 person town and do self-storage or mobile home parks. But in my mind, if I'm doing large scale multifamily, like, let's say 100 units or more, I'm going to want a town of 500,000 or more to damper the potential downturn potential of a large employer going bad.
Makes a lot of sense.
The follow-up question. The exit strategy for when you actually stabilize a self-storage, or are these just buy and holds for you just because of the cash flow from the business side? Because as more institutional players come into the market, they're not going to be looking at Beeville, Texas, are they? Or is it a package deal with a bow that you can drive those cap rates down?
No, the institutional players, you're right, Darren. We would expect mid-level players to want a place, like a mid-level, a high, large operator who wants a nice cash cow. We expect the institutional players to want to be in places like Greenville, South Carolina, Charlotte, Raleigh, Madison, Wisconsin. I'm thinking of places where we have units. And so the exit strategy is much the same as any other commercial, increase the value and then hopefully compress the cap rate by selling to a larger player who wants a stabilized asset and then selling either individually or in a portfolio.
Okay.
Are you asking a question, Ken? You're muted.
Yeah, sorry. It seems that the self-storage, you have a 350 unit place, you have one full-time employee. It seems like your entire business is riding on that one person. What if they get sick or they flake out or they don't show up, or it seems risky to have, your multi-million-dollar business relying on some $20 an hour employee.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Ken, I will say that typically they have a full-time employee who's a manager, and then they have a part-time employee so they can be open 7 days a week. And that part-time employee, you'd have to be sure that they step in. And this is one of the benefits of having multiple assets in one area so you can swap in and out. I know that one of our operators we've invested with has a whole bunch around northern Atlanta, so they can interchange and play backup. But I think you're right. I think that's a big risk.
Yeah. And they don't get paid a whole lot. So they're not really incentivized, right? What would a manager's salary be for something like that?
40 to 60,000.
Okay.
Yeah, not much.
Still, though, depending, I'm sure in a town where there's 4,000 people, 40 to 60,000 is probably a good salary for that town.
Yeah.
And that's probably, a significant bump for that family, I would imagine. So.
Yeah. A great manager actually does all kinds of things like connecting with the community, meeting realtors, meeting moving companies, going to those, cocktail hour events, all that stuff. Great manager doesn't just sit there behind the desk.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Who else has something? Sorry.
Sorry, just to follow up. Where would you look to hire a great manager like that?
Ken, I have no idea. You stumped me, man. The Wellings capital model is, so I'm not saying we're like Warren Buffett, but I am saying we're following in his model. His model is to buy companies that have great team, great structure, great business model, and then trust them to do the heavy lifting. So when Warren Buffett bought Dairy Queen, he didn't get involved. I don't think he got involved in picking ice cream flavors and picking managers and running the company. And so in the same way, Wellings Capital, we have 5 main operators we invest with, and they figure all that out. And so I don't really know how they find the managers, but I know that they're quite stringent, at least the operators we work with, on finding the right person. And in some cases, I can think of a couple where they actually transferred somebody who was moving up into a regional, had a career path into a regional level. They actually transferred somebody, I think it was from Key West, Florida to Bradenton, Florida, to run a facility there, for example.
Interesting. Thank you.
Where are you in Florida?
I'm in Palm Beach County.
Oh, nice.
Right in between Bradenton and the Keys.
Any opportunity to turn that warehouse you have into storage?
There's 2 storage facilities on the same block. But if I really wanted to, there is a market for container storage where you get shipping containers and they can rent out for like $400 a month is what I'm told. Yep. So, you put up, I have, probably 7-8 acres of woodland. So I can convert, let's say 3 or 4 of that, and you can put up a few hundred containers. So there's opportunity for that kind of thing that's not really served by the typical self-storage. But so it could be interesting, but it's 2-hour drive for me, so I don't want to operate it, and that's where I'm getting into questions of, well, how do you find the operator and the manager, and it's a lot of business to manage. I never wanted to go into retail, so that's why back a little bit from the self-storage.
I wouldn't either. Hey, Ken, and you probably know this, the depreciation on a storage container, if you buy those, is 100% in year 1. I think even if they eliminate the bonus depreciation rules, which they might, I think it's still probably 100% in year 1 depreciation under Section 179. And I'm not positive of that, by the way, but I think it's true. And then also property taxes are much lower because it's not real property, it's detached property.
Yeah, there's already a 40,000 square foot warehouse on the property. It's just a single tenant right now.
Right.
I'm trying to rent out either the whole space or sell it. But if I have to operate it, I'll have to be creative with it. But the shipping container idea seems interesting because it's a very different class of tenant for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, what type of tenant are we talking? Who would store their container?
More of an industrial tenants. It's stuff that doesn't need to be outside, equipment, different things along those lines, farm equipment that's not used, year round, that's only used 2-3 weeks out of the year. I'm not super familiar with it. I'm just going by what some of the locals over there were telling me that they're interested in. I've gotten a lot of offers for the land, to rent out the land, for vehicles, for tractors, for all kinds of different equipment. But they want half an acre or an acre or a container or 2 And I haven't really investigated because that's not really my model, but I thought it was interesting. And since we're talking about storage, I figured it was worth mentioning.
Is there any valuable timber on that land?
Not that I know of.
Who asked that?
I did. Yeah.
Who, Logan?
Logan, yeah.
Oh, I couldn't see you.
Yeah.
Yeah, my son's looking for timberland in the Carolinas, Virginia, Kentucky. If you ever run across any, he's really very serious about it.
Okay. Yeah. Is there a particular type of timber he's looking for? Just hickory,
oak, hardwoods, pine, poplar, etc.
Okay.
For what purpose?
He buys large tracts of land, like right now he's got offers on 350 acres and 500, well, not 500, I think it has 500 total, but he's buying like 200 of it, as low as 50 acres, and he'll timber it, replant it, and hold it long term. And the timber, when he timbers it, often it pays a significant chunk of the cost of the property.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, timber right now, the prices are through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah.
You too.
Yeah, he's got 1,100 acres right now in Southwest Virginia.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. I will keep my eyes open for timberland for sure.
Okay, great. Yeah, especially northwest of you, up, in the Blue Ridge Mountains, especially.
Yeah, for sure. In a previous life, I was in manufacturing, and we made hand tools. And one of our biggest suppliers was a hickory handle supplier, and they had a factory, 2 factories in Tennessee, and we had one out in Arkansas, and so we were very well connected into that whole realm. So, it's always been interesting to me. So it's a neat model. I've got family who's done similar things, not from a business perspective, but from a personal perspective. Wanted to buy hunting land, bought 150 acre plot of land, timbered some of it and paid off the land. Essentially, it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's great.
Cool. Aurelian, you want to take us out?
Yeah, there was yet another great iteration of our little group, and thank you Paul for joining us. Thank you guys for being here, for coming week after week. And so the next session in 2 weeks will be with Nancy Miller. She does triple net leases, single tenants, and so that's going to be the topic for that night. And so we look forward to having you all there. And yeah, thanks again for joining us tonight.